All right, welcome to the Discipleship on Repeat podcast, where our goal is to entertain, enlighten, and encourage you, our listeners. I'm your host, Matt, and with me I got my co-host, as always, Chris.
Hey, Matt, how are you, man?
Doing good, man. Really happy to be here today.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining me, brother.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, so what's been going on, Ned? How are you doing?
Oh, brother, I have been living it up. I just got back from a camp and was just completely filled to the brim and overflowing with the Holy Spirit, man. It was so
Awesome.
encouraging and so refreshing to just be in the Spirit for like 3 days consecutive, and just to be poured into and taught and to be reminded of how good God is and all the grace that Jesus brings to us. And I'm just so grateful for that.
Wow, man, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, man, it was fantastic. So,
Y'all spent some days out in the woods or something, right? Didn't you?
it was at a campground, a kind of small campground, but we were able to. We spent a lot of time in like classroom type stuff environment, just learning and being discipled by some guys that have been doing this for a long time, been walking with the Lord for a long time, and really imparting some good, solid teachings on us. And so it was just really, really good.
That's awesome, man. I think that's great. I think we all need that time to disconnect a little, from God. I mean, from our phones, really, so we can be close to God. You know what I mean? And that's with so many distractions out there in the world today, man.
Yep.
I think that's I need to get in on that stuff, man.
Yeah, man, that was so good. Like no phone for 3 days.
Yeah.
Was
Wow.
amazing. And my wife is so awesome. She was like, I told her, I said, "Do you have the contact numbers if you need me or whatever?" And she was like, "I'm not calling you. Just go and do what you need to do and enjoy it." And I'll tell you, that was so freeing to just put that phone away. Literally left it in the car for 3 days, and it was amazing. Just to walk with a brotherhood of guys and to be in the Spirit for 3 solid days was just awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
What about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, so man, I've been just same old, really for the most part. Just been a lot of work and stuff, but really just been conscious on my health these last month or two. So I've lost a little bit of weight, started sleeping better, But
That's good.
But one thing, thanks, man. One thing I've noticed though, just through all this, since we decided to do this podcast and everything, that man, the arrows just from the enemy have certainly increased, man. I'm
Truth.
just telling you, yeah,
Truth.
absolutely. Yeah. It's just been everything you could think of, thoughts of, all kinds of, idolatry and greed and lust and all these type of just arrows, man. Just trying to redirect me from this path that we're walking here,
That's right.
So. I appreciate being able to lean on you through this time, man, and my wife and other people too. So it's just been definitely knows I'm on the right path, though.
That's
like we talked about, you know what I mean? Anytime you get opposition, brother, you're on the right
That's
path,
right. Yeah, if the enemy's trying to stop you or persuade you or make you busy, you must be doing something right.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, absolutely. And I got to go to a funeral of a friend of mine here recently that had passed. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, man, it was really tough. He was, my age, really, and he had been suffering for a decade plus, and just it was the way that he lived his life, really, just with the zest that he had, and the people that talked, and his family, and man, there's probably 150, 200 people there. So it was just, very just, I mean, that's how you want to live your dash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for real.
You know what I mean? If your life is on a tombstone, is just a dash. You know what I mean?
That's right.
How are you going to live that? You know what I mean? And this guy, I mean, he was he helped a lot of people. He in what he did for his career, and was able just to make an impact, man. And I think that was something that's I really want to take away from, and just always remember that spirit that he had, and just which is why we're here, man. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, this is life is short, life is fragile. Let's make the most of it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, so I'm happy to be here with you today, brother.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
It's good to be here with you.
yeah, absolutely, dude. So, without further ado, let's talk about next, man, our left-hand shake. So to remind all our listeners out there, right, we talked about this in our opening episode. If you guys didn't hear that, I would encourage you to go back to listen to our first episode.
Yep.
But what we what we're kind of putting out there, this trying to put this movement, this viral movement, if you will, we're hoping is just a posture of vulnerability, and because we believe that if you show some to others, you're going to receive it in return.
That's right.
So each week we want to talk about something that how where we've been able to make an impact in a stranger's life, or maybe somebody where you made a connection and a breakthrough. So, man, for me. I want to share about a story I had. I met a guy at the gym here recently, who I'm going to call Ben, and this was. So we're in the sauna one day because I sit in there a lot. I've talked to you about that, how the health benefits of sauna, but
it's supposed to be really good.
Yeah, it does, man. It's a life changer, man. So it's not the podcast to talk about saunas, but hey, if you might want to consider that if you're out there, if you haven't done it before.
Heck yeah.
But the cool thing, so I usually sit in there about 20 minutes at a time, and this was recently where I we just started small talking a little bit, and he's one of the few guys that didn't have his earbuds in or whatever, so he got to talk.
It's crazy.
And we were I just finished. He said, "Hey, what's going on? Why do you do this on and everything?" And I just finished my 5-year anniversary of completing chemotherapy.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, man, it was awesome.
That's fantastic.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. But I just got back from my appointment, and I was talking about, I was kind of living it, I was kind of feeling it really well.
Yeah.
And we were talking about the health benefits of sauna and how it's helped me kind of stay cancer free amongst other lifestyle changes that I've made.
Right.
And when I started talking about, just going through the chemotherapy and the cancer that I went through, I could just kind of see this shift in this guy's face. You know what I mean? It's like, he kind of like, he just kind of stepped back. He kind of paused for a second, and he kind of looked down for a split second or two. And then he started telling me about this story that how his brother's been going through leukemia and, how it's really been difficult for him and his family. I could just kind of see this little shift in this guy. And, I tried to remind him that, hey, man, I mean, what you're going through is normal. I'm sorry to hear about what just happening to your brother and everything. But, I told him a little bit about the good news, and just kind of, shared with him, a little bit about, hey, this is what got me through it, my faith and my people that I surround myself with. And it was just really cool to get that feedback, This guy I never met 5 minutes ago, you know what I mean? And now we're right into talking about the gospel, you know what I mean? And that's really what the embodiment of this left hand shake is, you know what I mean? So it was really cool, man, to spend that time with him. And I've seen him another time since then, and we had another pretty good little combo. I hadn't seen him in a little bit since, just kind of coming and going and stuff. I'm pretty regular at the gym, getting that sauna time and everything. Yeah. So, but I hope that we can, develop a friendship over time and, kind of see, maybe, talk to him more about it and stuff. But I think that the good thing is I just planted that seed, and that's really all we have to do. You know what I mean? It's not our job to win everybody to Christ necessarily. We just play our role. You know what I mean? And my role at that moment was to plant the seed. So really, that's kind of the embodiment of the left hand shake, man. So I was excited to do that.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
And just a moment of obedience in that, right? Being able to share that with him, and Christ, that was his command, before he returned to heaven, was for us to go and make disciples of the world.
Absolutely, man.
And just be able to go out there and share that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get to that, I know you got a story for me too.
I do. I do have a left handshake story for you. This one was really interesting to me. It happened just the other day at work. Me and a coworker were out doing our jobs together, and I love spending time with this guy. He's a family guy, Christian, real solid dude, and we had to split up to go do part of our job, and so he took off in the truck to go down to a different location and do some work down there. Okay. And on his way down, he kind of felt like, hey, I need to charge my phone, his work phone. And because we use our work phones to tether our computers to do all of our documentation.
You got remote and all that stuff.
Yeah, we're out in the middle of a airfield in the middle of nowhere.
Gotcha.
And so it crossed his mind, like, hey, I need to charge my phone. And he looked at it, and it was 50-60%. And he's like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, he's on his phone, doing his documentation, and I'm at a different location trying to use my phone, which is not working. And so I'm like, what in the world is going on with this thing? And so I've battled my phone for weeks now trying to figure this out, and it just won't work. Well, then he comes back and he's like, well, just try my phone. Like, it was just working down there. So sure enough, my computer connects straight to it real easy. I'm going to town trying to get all my documentation done. And you know that moment where you're on a website and you go to hit submit, and then it like, oh, lost connection, right? Man. And you just kind of throw your hands up like, no, right? Like, it was one of those moments. Like, I had done all of this documentation, typed a big novel and all of these great things.
I hate that, man.
And it's gone. And I'm just like, no. So anyway, he kind of chuckles, and I'm like, what are you laughing at, right? And he goes, man, isn't it funny how the Holy Spirit will put something in your mind, like charge your phone? And he goes, because think about it. If I had charged my phone like I felt prompted, it would have been charging for 45 minutes, and you easily could have done all your work.
Yeah.
But I didn't, right? I didn't. And it was interesting because had he done that, I could have got all my stuff done too, and we would have been done. But it just made me think, like, the Holy Spirit, we expect like God to speak to us through the Holy Spirit and for like something big, like earth shattering to happen.
Yeah, the burning bush, right?
Right,
yeah.
right. And in reality, like, Jesus calls him the helper, right? He's there to help us. And he was trying to get my friend to just charge his phone up.
Yeah.
Because he knew we were going to need it later. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought that was so interesting how one little act of disobedience to charge a phone turned into something that took a lot longer to get done later on because, we kind of blew it off. And so how frequently we do that in our lives. So for me, that was the takeaway. It was like, when you feel that urging from the Spirit, act on it, much like you did at the gym.
Yeah.
Just be obedient and just take that step forward in faith and watch what God's got for you.
Absolutely. And who knows if you, that extra time you took to do it, God might have needed you to do something else.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So you might think it's insignificant that, hey, it's just phone charge, and it took me an extra 15 minutes or whatever. Well, what if God needed that 15 minutes for you to do something?
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe you're going to see somebody on the side of the road you could have helped.
It's exactly
you know what I mean? Or whatever. I don't know what it is, but those missed opportunities lead to something else.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I really think that's a good example, man. Obedience and disobedience is something that I know we've talked about a lot.
Right.
And so I think that's a great story, man, to remember that even things that don't even seem significant, we need to take advantage of those opportunities because you never know what it's going to lead to.
That's right. Well, and if you're trying to listen for Jesus's voice, for the voice of God in there, if you're not listening on the regular, how are you going to recognize it at the end?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the importance of learning that still small voice now. And of course, he's not going to give you something big without starting you off on something small.
That's right. That's a really good point, man. I didn't think about that, but it's baby steps. God doesn't show you everything at once.
That's
you know what I mean? If he showed you everything at once, and you'd say, "Heck no, man, I'm going to quit."
Yeah, it'd be terrifying, right?
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, just start small, and I think that's where realizing, like we did, that being obedient and that small thing, charge your phone. Mm-hmm. Just taking that moment to do that. Like you said, it could have bigger implications later on, but definitely, if we're not listening to the small things or we're disregarding those, how do we expect to hear the big things?
That's true. That's true. Maybe God should have put stupid on the end of that, right? Charge your phone, stupid.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's our name half the time, right? So it'd be okay.
Absolutely, man. Cool, man. Great story. I appreciate you sharing that, brother.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So let's dive in actually to our meat potatoes here of the week. Our topic of this week, I think is really important to us, and it's in the name of our title here, which is discipleship. So that's really, we felt like this was the opportunity for us to kind of give more of a normal format of our show, and as opposed to the intro, the one we had last time.
Right.
So this time we just our focus on this episode is about discipleship, and we want to just kind of talk about what that means to us and everything. So we want to start out really in this topic about just really reading our the verse for the week, the passage of the week, which is really, I think, the passage of our entire show, really. You know what I mean? The basis of it, our mission verse statement, if you will. So I want to get into Luke 9, verse 23. Here it reads, "Then he said to them all, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet to lose or forfeit their very self? So that's Jesus talking right there, man.
That's right.
I mean, he's hitting it right between the eyes on that one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So about the daily discipleship of following Christ and basically picking up your cross for him, you
That's
know?
right.
So I know you got some definitions and stuff you want to share with us, brother. So I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah. So I spent some time, since we are talking about discipleship, I think it's important to kind of have a ground-based understanding, like how do we define discipleship, and like what is a disciple?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I found about being a disciple, it says that someone who's following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and is committed to his mission. And then that's being a disciple. So
For
discipleship is actually doing those things,
Right.
being active in doing those things. And then disciple making went a little bit step further, and it said entering relationships to help people trust and follow Jesus. So to me, discipleship and disciple making kind of go hand in hand somewhat, because
For sure.
you're doing the mission that Jesus has given us, and you're being active in doing it, and you're leading more people to get that relationship with Jesus. So it kind of led me down like a train of thought. So I've got just a few points to talk about with it.
Okay.
And one of the things was like, what does it take to be a disciple? Now that we know what a disciple is, what's it take? And in Matthew 4:19, Jesus was calling the disciples, Peter and Andrew, and he says, "Come and follow me, and I'll teach you to fish for men."
Mm-hmm.
In
love
Luke,
that.
In Luke 14:25 through 33, it says, "Count the cost," right? So Jesus is telling you, like, you need to count the cost, what it's going to cost you to follow me. Because
Right.
I'm going to ask you to do some crazy things, and you're going to be showing them that you're my disciple, that you're following me. And so it says, count the cost. And are we really ready to give up everything for Jesus? Because that's what he's asking us to do, to lose our life, like you just read, and to go ahead and lay that down and pick up our cross with him and follow him completely and wholeheartedly in everything that we do. And so, he says that his burden is light, but it's not easy.
No.
And so putting him above everything else can be very challenging. And so I just think that that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we're being a disciple. Take that into account. Like, you're about to put in some work. And so I think that's important. And then what kind of work are we doing for Jesus was my next thought. What's the mission of Jesus? And in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, he says, "Go and make disciples of all the nations, baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." And so we're supposed to teach them to obey everything that Jesus commanded. And so, I mean, I know my Bible and your Bible are the same.
Right.
And I've got a lot of red words in there. And he's given us a lot of things to do. Love God and love people, and to share his word, to share his love and encourage. And so I think we've got our work cut out for us. Humanity as a whole has had its work cut out for it for a long time. And I think us taking that forward leads into my next bullet point here was, what's it look like for us? And so it's like, do our lives actually reflect Jesus, his commands? Like, are we living that out? Are we loving God and loving people? Are we obeying the urges of the Holy Spirit like we were just talking about? Are we willing to step into that and just be obedient? And even when it's not convenient, right? Like, sometimes it's hard. Like, it wasn't inconvenient for my buddy to plug his phone in,
Right.
but it was just a step that he thought unnecessary.
Yeah.
And so we just need to be completely all in obedient. And then, are we promoting Jesus to everybody, right? Or just the people that we love and care about? So you didn't know the guy at the gym, but you're still sharing Jesus with them.
Yeah.
And given that opportunity for him to come to that relationship, you're just planting seeds. And I think that that's important. And then the last bit of that I've got is, what are we willing to give up as we're being disciples? What are we laying down of our own wants, our own desires, so that we can follow him? And so what are we actually sacrificing so that we can be his disciple? What's that look like for us? And so for me, as I was kind of talking through those things and reading and studying those things, man, it's like I said, his burden is light, right? His yoke is easy, but like, the work is not very easy sometimes. And what he's asking is to give it all up for him and put him above everything else. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we're serving him.
Yeah.
To focus on, like, I'm doing this work for him, and I'm serving him in this capacity, whether it's at your job, in the church, or in our families. I think we just need to be applying that same principle all over the place.
Yeah, and that's a great way to look at it, man, because really, when you think about it, the cost in a worldly view is steep, right? I mean, to lay down, lay down your life every day, for Jesus, But when we focus and shift that mindset towards you're serving him in every single way, I think it kind of, in a way, lowers the cost. You know what I mean? It kind of like, it makes it lighter and easier. Like, okay, God, I'm willing to do this, even if it's, plug in my phone or prompt me to give money somewhere, or it might be to help somebody on the side of the road, whatever it might be, you know what I mean? So, or in your job, you might run across somebody. So I think when you have that mindset, I think it kind of makes it a lot easier, to be able to do that. So
I think so. I think obedience prompts obedience, right?
For sure.
So being small in those little things adds up, and you're getting more in tune with hearing his voice, or being obedient, or following what he's telling you to do. And so I think as we step closer to him, our will changes to be his will, right? Like we're taking him more on ourselves. And so we are becoming more like Christ as we're living. And I think that's what it's really about, right? Is you want to be more like him every day as a believer. And so if we're not losing ourselves to be more like him, we're not really being more like him.
Yeah.
Like we're just kind of faking it.
Yeah, just kind of fitting him in on the side, hey, I'm going to continue to do what I've always done, but I'm just going to, have a little Jesus mixed in, you know what I mean? And fresh can of Jesus will, like we talked about before. But we have to be able to realize, and for me, and talking about the personal experience of all that, what does that look like, right? In our lives, for me, I think, the word I've always liked, and I think I mentioned this. We talked about this a few years ago, I think, about pruning, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, it's just that removing of those dead branches, because really that's what sin is, death in our life, right? So, if our life is a tree, we want to remove those dead branches, so we can grow upwards towards Christ, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm no gardener or anything, but I do know that if you cut the dead ones, and it's going to grow, you know what I mean? So, and it's a great example too, because those dead branches, those sinful branches in our life, it's preventing us from really reaching our full potential.
Right, they're just sapping our strength and energy.
Exactly. So I think that for me, and as I've gotten older and realizing I'm still on the journey, that we got to continue to be just mindful of okay, I can do this. I did this now.
Right.
What do I need to do next, God? You know what I mean? It's not. You never really get to a point where you're like, okay, all the boxes are checked. It doesn't really get to that point. No. You know what I mean? It seems like as soon as you check one box, so to speak, there's going to be another one pop up, right?
Yes. So he's a lamp unto our feet, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You just get to see the next step.
Exactly. You think, I can take a break. I can sit back, God.
Right.
We're good, man. Man, and then the next one pops up. You know what I mean? So, like we talked about before, if you're not in a battle now, God's just preparing you for the next one.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So, I think that's a big part for me, is just that pruning, removing those sin and replacing, of course, with actions of obedience to Christ, and just that renewal of your mind. I pray that all the time, like Paul talks about, like just that continual renewing of our mind and being conformed to the Spirit that's inside of us as believers, as opposed to the conformity to the world.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I mean, when you think about it, I hear people compare like today versus, back in Jesus' time. Everyone in culture has been struggling with culture. Yeah. Like they struggle with culture. We struggle with culture, and when you look at it, like they struggled with sex and addictions. Mm-hmm. We struggle with sex and addictions. Yeah. Like it's the same sin, just on repeat. Yeah. Again and again. And the enemy plays the same game again and again. Yeah. And so, how do we break that? It's by becoming a disciple. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the actions might look different over the course of time, but the tactics are still the same. That's right.
You know what I mean? They're our enemies used them for, many years, obviously, and
Yep.
anybody. So
That's right.
you don't ever need to think like, oh, I'm the only one that's ever been through this. You know
Truth.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we've all been through this. We all do this. So I hope that our listeners are out there are thinking about who's discipling them and how who they discipling as well.
That's right.
Everybody needs a Paul and a Timothy in their life. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need somebody that's speaking into you, and it needs to flow out through you into somebody else,
That's
like
right.
like Paul did for Timothy. You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
So everybody needs that.
Yep.
And for me, too, some other, I wanted to talk about some examples and stuff about
Yeah.
how we've had, discipleship in our lives. And I mentioned earlier about, my cancer that I had in the past. And I know that, I had to go through the chemotherapy I had to go through was about 6 months. It was long, it was a very long chemotherapy for the type of cancer that I had. And it was, you were there every 2 weeks doing these treatments,
Right.
to take the full day off of work,
Right.
and I was working through the whole thing, which was,
That's hard.
yeah, it was,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, especially towards the end, man, it was really tough. But it's in those few days after those treatment sessions, but we were there all day.
Wow.
And most of the time it was my wife with me, for the most part. I think my mom went with me a time or two, but when we sit in those treatment rooms, man, I mean, you sit there, and I'm one of the younger guys that was there, because
Mm-hmm.
most of the people that have cancer, they're, older, even senior citizens, things like that, but
Right.
not always. But anyway, my point was that, when you're sitting there, you're seeing these people every week, you know what I mean? And they're just a few feet away from you, and they're getting their treatment just like you for whatever they're having to be going through.
Right.
We got to know these people, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And there was a one couple that I remember my wife and I were really discipling at that time, and just trying to lift them up. And her, frankly, her diagnosis, I think, was arguably worse than mine. You know what I mean?
Right.
As far as the survival rate and stuff like that, and so we got the opportunity to get to know them and to pray for them, and we got to see them. Most of the times when we were there, not every time, most times.
Right.
But and then I even remember too when I got what was really cool. It was God really kind of showing me and really lifted my spirits, because when I went to when I had to get my port removed, you know what I mean, that they used to give you the intravenous drugs and everything.
Right.
I went to a local facility, and we ran into her there.
Oh wow.
I was like, wow, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I would see, what are the odds? You know what I
Right.
mean? She finished her cancer right when I did, and she went to the same place at the same time, that I did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To get her port removed.
Yeah.
It was just really cool to see that, and it's like, it felt like it was like God telling me and my wife, like, hey, look, I mean, you did good. You
Right.
kind of, you made a difference,
Yeah.
You really felt, I just felt really encouraged by that whole situation,
Yeah.
and it made me want to do more, like
Right.
it was that one step, you know what I mean, that God was showing me, like, hey, you do this one, I'll show you another one, I'll show you another one, and you have no idea. We think we know what God can do, but
Yeah.
really our minds have no idea,
Right.
I mean, and this was just a great example of that.
Yeah.
And I was really encouraged by that. And also through when there was people discipling me. There was a gentleman that he actually had the same birthday I do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we got that, commonality and everything. And I started my chemotherapy the week after, I think it was right around my birthday, actually. It's the same week or the next week. So he had, obviously birthday too. So, and I would see him every week, and I've kept in touch with him. He's an older gentleman. Unfortunately, he'll probably be in chemotherapy the rest of his life to a certain degree, because the type of cancer he had it's not curable. It's just something he has to continue going on. But his life expectancy is still great. It's just he has to keep going through it all the time. So, and through that time, I've seen it kind of shift a little bit. Because like he was like mentoring me at first, and now I feel like I've gotten through it. I'm healthy. I'm back really stronger than I ever have been in so many ways.
Right.
After the lifestyle changes, and I've kept in touch with him, and now I feel like I'm kind of doing the same to him now, because I know it's got to beat down on him over time, just knowing that he's had
It's got
that.
to be exhausting.
Absolutely, man. So I think that those are some great examples how, and that obviously was anytime you go through some sort of, cancer or whatever, it's going to be some trauma involved, mentally and stuff, and growth and everything. Not everybody's going to have that, and I understand that, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody else. I mean, I hope that you don't have to get cancer to really experience the movement of God. But if you do, I just want people to know out there that, hey, you can still be used. You can still be used to bless somebody else, and vice versa as well. So
yeah, absolutely.
I thought these were great examples, man.
Yeah, man, that's great. That was great. Yeah, I think being present where you're at, and available and ready to serve, like all the time. In that situation, you all were there being treated. Yeah, and it's interesting how God used each of you to pour in and out of each other, to pick each other up and encourage and all the things, and you were just there and available. And I think that's just amazing. That's amazing how God can use such a hard time in your life to bring so much light to your life and to those around you.
Absolutely, man. I mean, and that's the key I would want people to remember, is that it doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter what you're going through, that God can use you at that moment. You don't have to clean yourself up. You don't have to be at your best to allow God to use you. And even in a difficult circumstance, God can still use you to bless others, So that was really there was a lot of lessons packed really through that whole ordeal and everything. And it never ends, I still, have to see doctors once a year and stuff, but I mean, I'm just thankful for God to heal me. And a lot of the turning points that I remember that I've shared with you before as well, is that the moment that I started to thank God for bringing me through, or giving me cancer, I should say. I remember that's a moment I'll never forget, is the first time I thanked him for that, because it allowed me to grow my faith, and to make an impact with somebody else, you know, and really that's what I've been praying for my whole life. I didn't know it would take cancer for me to really do that, you know. I mean, but sometimes, hey, that's what it takes, his plans are better than ours, so that was really the big lesson for me through all that, experience, was that, hey, let's do it, just show up, be there no matter what, and God will use you. So I know you had some stories too you wanted to share, right?
Thanks for sharing that, Matt. I know it's really personal, and I just appreciate you sharing that with us.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure, dude. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things as we've talked about discipleship, one of the things I thought about was you hear one of Jesus's disciples was called the zealot.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought, what does that mean? And so it's kind of like a fanatic, right? They were over the top. He was all in on what he was doing, and then he found Jesus, and he's all in on Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where you want to be, all in on Jesus, and just kind of sold out to him. And so it reminded me of a friend of ours that we played fantasy football with. And this dude is all in on fantasy football. He is all over every player, all over every team. He knows my fantasy football team better than his own, I swear. Maybe not. Maybe he just knows them all that good. But he knows every player I've got. He knows who I've got on the bench. He knows every single person in there. And he is relentless in trying to, quote unquote, make my team better.
Good sales pitch.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, he is just right there in the thick of it, just again and again, trying to make wheel and deal and all of that. And he's fanatical about it. And so as I was thinking about this, he's a true disciple of the game. He's really into following these players and following the fantasy football, and he's following what's going on so closely and so adamantly that I don't know if this guy sleeps at all, because he's doing this all the time. Every time I log in just to check the app, he's immediately sending me a message. So I don't know if he's got some notification set up or something. I don't know. But he is just all in, all bought into this.
Yeah.
And there's no money if we win this thing. It's just
bragging rights.
Rights, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just blown away by how completely sold out to this he is. And I just thought about it, like, am I that sold out to Jesus? Right? Like, we want to be complete fanatics for Jesus. We want to be these disciples following Jesus and willing to go and do whatever he's telling us to do. Am I that sold out? And so, like, it really, like, I think that was the Spirit again, like, convicting me of that. Like, are you there yet? You know, are you in the game? Have you been studying the playbook? You know, have I been looking at the Bible enough and reading the Bible and, like, internalizing it and all the things that I need to be doing? Am I doing that? Am I doing it enough? You know, and am I willing to share that with those around me? You know, and share my sufferings, just, you know, just like you were just sharing yours, and being willing and able to use those times, even the hardest times like that, to grow closer to God, you know, and to share Him with others. And, you know, I think I do good in some parts. You know, I'm getting better in other parts, you know, and I think in my mind, you know, our first area that we should be sharing that's with our family.
Right.
You know, and especially as men, leading our family spiritually, I think is a very key role that we have. And, you know, I really feel like we've got to lean into that. And so how do I set that example for my kids? You know, we're praying together, and we're, you know, reading Bible studies every so often, and we're talking about things, talking about Jesus and grace and all these things. And I just think that that's important, you know, and are we willing to be that same, you know, Jesus follower, Jesus disciple, Jesus fanatic.
Yeah.
24/7. You know, when you leave the walls of your home, are you the same guy talking about Jesus? You know, when I go to church, am I the same guy talking about Jesus? When I go to work, you know, am I the same guy talking about Jesus? Does my life reflect Him? And so I really felt convicted by that. And, you know, it was so crazy because, you know, I thought fantasy football, like, this dude's just crazy about it. But in reality, I think the Holy Spirit just really enlightened me in that, and kind of pulled me into, like, hey, man, I've still got work for you.
Yeah.
And I still want you to be closer to me. And like you said, I think it's a journey. That relationship with Him is a journey that we're all on. And the closer that we get to Him, the more work we're doing for Him. And the better that our relationship gets with Him, and the deeper it gets, the more fanatical we're going to get. And I think you see that from Jesus' disciples. You know, He had those guys, and from a small band of guys, we still have, you know, all the acts that took place, all the stories in the Bible, all the lives changed just from that small group of guys that He got together. And so I think, you know, it's reached us here, and, you know, that's how we're using this podcast, is to reach out to others, to disciple them.
100%.
Yep. So, yeah.
That's cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, that's true. I mean, I know we talked about this too before. Like, if you're going to the ball game, you know what I mean? People are yelling for your team. You're cheering for your team. Are you cheering for Jesus with that same amount of intensity? You know, I mean, that's a sobering question to ask yourself. You know what I mean? Where is He on your priority list? You know what I mean? So, he needs to be number one. That's above your family, your spouse, your health, everything. You know what I mean? So, it's easy for those priorities to get shifted, you know, from a daily or weekly type scenario in everybody's life. But it's important to recalibrate that and to be around other disciples that are holding you accountable and making sure, like, hey, are you living the life that I know you're capable of, and what you've shown me in the past? You know, I mean, you need to have people in your life that are just other disciples. You know, again, that Paul and Timothy. You know, so I think it's a great example, man. I think that even through fantasy football, you know, God can use that. You know, you know, the limits of God using people is far beyond than what we can ever imagine. Yeah, you know what I mean. And we think we can put Him in this little box and think, oh, God's never going to use this. You know, He's never gonna. He's never going to ask me to plug my phone in, or, you know, this is just fantasy football. This is just for fun on the side. God's like, nope. There's a lesson to be learned there.
That's right.
You know, so and it's a step of obedience that grows our faith that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that that could lead us into really what kind of action steps, right, that we want to take and give our listeners, you know, about what we can do to, how do we implement this in our lives? You know what I mean? These are great stories I think we've shared today, but how can we give people some advice on how to live a life of disciple, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have some things we wanted to share with everybody a little bit. I think the first one is really obvious, I think, and that is just being in the Word daily.
Right.
I think that I would encourage everybody. It's great to start out your day. I mean, ultimately, I think as long what time of the day is somewhat negotiable or whatever. But I do think that I've noticed. I used to be a nighttime reader, and you've encouraged me a few years ago to be in the daytime or starting your day, just like you start your first fruits, and I've noticed that really take a difference and kind of shape my day and allow my actions to be more obedient to Christ throughout the day, as opposed to looking in retrospect at night and sleeping on it and starting all over again. I think that you can still grow both ways.
Yes.
Don't get me wrong, but I think the acceleration you're going to see in growing your faith and growing your connection with God is if you do it more in the early parts of the day. I think
absolutely.
you know what I mean. So
Absolutely.
for me, just being in the Word daily. I know you and I both. If you're not there's plenty of places you can get the Word. Obviously, the Bible apps we both use that. There's a great feature on there. It'll actually play it back through there. Hook it up. We both. I know we're both Bluetooth guys. We're listening to it on the road. So I think that's a great. I listen to my plans every day, every morning on the way to work. So just having that Word. The Word is breathing and life from God, so we need to be listening, hearing that, reading it.
That's right.
Meditating on it all the time. So that's really the first thing, being in the Word, right?
Yeah. I think that being in the Word consistently, daily, even throughout the day if you can, even if it's spreading it across your day. I try to do that as much as possible. I just think that's a great opportunity to be in the Word and to hear directly from God through the Word. I think that's important. And I think when you pair that with being consistently in prayer every day,
for sure,
throughout the day, and just sometimes it takes, like, when you're doing things, sometimes in my life I have to set things up like a cue. So I see this and it reminds me to do this.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of the things I was doing for a while was every time I'd walk through a door at work, I would pray before I walked into that door. Right. So I'd walk into my boss's office, God, guide my conversation. And it was just a split-second prayer, right? Sometimes when I'd walk out of my truck to go out to one of my locations to do some work, it's going to take a lot of brain power, a lot of problem solving. So I might pray when I'm getting out of the truck, God, guide my thoughts and actions today. And so it's simple, it's not some big formal prayer. It's just casting that care at Him and being able and willing to give it voice to God, whether it's, just silently in your mind praying, or even whisper under your breath, or praying out loud. I think that how critical that is.
Yeah, and it can be conversational too, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be this big ordeal. I think that people have this false, facade or whatever, what prayer life has to be.
Right.
And it certainly can be those things. But it can literally just be a conversation, an ongoing conversation. We don't need to check a box, or, hey, I got 5 minutes, let's just fit it in. And sometimes that's fine.
Right.
But it can also be just hey, I got a 30-minute ride here to where I'm going. I'm just going to talk to God the whole time. Yeah. I'm going to pretend Jesus is sitting right next to me.
That's
and
right.
I got a seatbelt on there for him. He's chilling in the AC like me, and whatever. Yeah. So it can just be a conversation like that too, right?
Yeah, I spend more time either listening to my Bible or praying while I'm driving down the road, especially around here. Crazy drivers and all the things, but it's a moment to have that conversation with Him and just try to voice my concerns, voice my worries, or praise Him.
Yeah.
Right. And to just exalt His name. And I think that's overlooked sometimes, but I think that's part of what we should be doing during that prayer time, is doing that. And, and I think it's one thing when you're talking to God and you're praising Him and you're asking Him things for other people or for yourself, for healings or whatever. But I think the next critical part of that component of that is to stop and listen.
Yes.
So, just like we're doing on this podcast, we're talking and having a conversation here. We're listening to each other, and we're engaged in that conversation. I think that's where we need to be engaged with God at the same time. And when you're praying to Him, stop and listen, because He might just tell you to plug your cell phone in. Right.
Right.
Or He might just be trying to drop a knowledge bomb on you in there. And I think that it's important to just stop and be in tune and just maybe spend some time in meditation if you can, and just think about it, breathe it in, and just ask God, what are you trying to tell me? Like, what do I need to learn from today?
Right.
And spend some time just listening and learning and training our mind to hear that still small voice. Because I think that's so important, and I think it's easily overlooked because we're in such a hurry.
Yeah, and the world is a loud place, you know what I mean? There's always something going on all the time, you know, and I think it's important for us to shut those things down, to listen, like you had in the camping, you know, trip here recently, you know what I mean? You got to turn the phone off, you got to put aside some of the daily things that we know are going to be there all the time, right?
Yep.
They know they're going to come back to these chores or these tasks or whatever it might be, but we need to set aside that time to listen for God. God speaks and he whispers.
That's right.
That's how he speaks to us.
That's right.
And if you don't turn everything off, you're not likely going to hear him, because you're not going to get a burning bush. You're not going to get
Right.
Angels coming down from heaven, most likely, to tell you, like, hey, what you need to do today. So I think it's important to have that time just to be able to connect and spend that time. And I think that's one that's really overlooked. I think a lot of people that I've talked to in my life and through my Christian walk is that everybody knows you got to be in the Word and pray, right? And those are kind of like the low hanging fruit, at least
Right.
people know that, I should say.
Yeah.
But the thing, like, I think people think, well, man, I'm not really hearing from God. I don't know what to do.
Right.
Like, well, are you actually being quiet to listen?
Right. Did you stop and listen?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and it seems kind of self-explanatory, but man, it seems overlooked a lot,
Right. Right.
I know for me, like, I start off every day. I get up. One of the first things I do is I lay down and I do my stretching in the morning and stuff. Just some general exercise to do to kind of loosen my back up and my hips and everything like that. And then I just sit there for a few minutes, really, just to pause and just to kind of reset my mind.
Yeah.
This is even before I do my prayer and my word time. Just to, hey, God, what do I need to learn today? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is it you need to show me today? I'm listening. And then I just kind of sit there and be quiet for a few minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think it's so critical.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So after we've read the Bible and we've prayed and we've meditated, what do you think the last thing we need to be doing is?
Well, the last one is we got to follow the promptings. You know what I mean? We got to take those actions. We got to take advantage of those action steps that God gives us, that obedience, right, and delivering for God. You know, I mean, because ultimately we are the hands and the feet here. You know what I mean? And if you're growing in your own life and your own your walk, that's great. But to live out a disciple and to be a discipleship, as we're talking about here today, you have to also take action. Which is, again, why we're here doing this today.
Right.
This is one action that God's asked us to do, and I'm excited to do it with you, of course. But ultimately, it doesn't even stop here. There's going to be more things we have to do.
Right.
There are tasks really until we're called home. Ultimately, there's something that we got to do every day if we're listening and doing these other steps.
Yep, that's right. I think the action step is like the vital kind of the proof's in the pudding, right?
Absolutely.
Are you truly a disciple? Show me.
Yeah.
Right. I'll show you my faith by my acts.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, I think that it's so important to be able to lay everything else down and just follow, and that's exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah, and if you don't take action, how are people going to see that? You know what I mean? How are other people that you're trying to? You might be thinking, well, yeah, I want to be an example to this, coworker or this longtime buddy that I know is not a believer or whatever. Well, if they looked at your life and your actions that you take, I mean, they're not going to see you in the Word daily. They're not going to see you taking quiet time alone or even consistent in prayer. They're not going to see those three things.
Right.
But what they will see is your actions,
That's
right? And your obedience and what steps you're taking.
Yep.
So if you're not doing that, then how is God going to see it? How are other people going to see it? And don't get me wrong, it's not a contest. It's not a show all type of thing. It's not a hey God, look at me, I'm doing. It's not a praise thing. It's not, we don't like Paul says, it's not to boast upon that.
Right.
But you have to be able, people have to see that and know, like, you know, and a lot of the people that I know, and I would say most of the people that I know that they know I'm a follower, obviously they see it in my actions, you know, and that's really like you said, the proof in the pudding.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think you have to live that sermon.
Yes.
Right? Live out the words of God, of Jesus, and go and make disciples and baptize and share the good news. And if our life's not reflecting that, then I think we're pointing the wrong direction.
Absolutely, man. So this is I've really enjoyed this podcast with you, man. This episode's
been great.
Yeah, it really has, dude. So, you know, I want to recap everybody, you know, for those action steps, you know, be in the Word daily. That's the first thing. Be consistent with that. Find your time to do that, preferably in the early part of the day if you can. Be consistent in prayer, you know, involve your family with that too, and your friends too, you know, that's great, you know, to have that, to share that moment with them. Number 3 is having that quiet time meditation. Make sure you're having that time each day, you know, frequently to listen for God. And number 4, obviously, is taking action, really, because without, you know, how's God going to use you if you're not willing to take action? So those are the 4 things I would encourage all our listeners to take with them from this podcast. And thank you all for listening here today. You know, I want to remind y'all that our goal is really to entertain, enlighten, and encourage you as our listeners. And I hope that you got that out of this today. We would love to hear feedback from you guys out there. We have an email address set up. It's pretty straightforward, like the title. It's discipleship_on_repeat@gmail.com. It's going to be listed in the show notes. We'd love to get any feedback you have, good or bad. I mean, hey, you know, go ahead and tell us if we stink. I don't care. You know what I mean? We're gonna keep going.
That's right. Step number 4.
Exactly.
Obedience.
There you go, brother. But thanks everybody for listening here today. And I just want to remind everybody in the meantime, keep grinding.